Hello and welcome to another walk back down the racing game memory lane to one of my favourite games, of course, Forza Motorsport 4 yet again, to a vehicle which was a DLC car. So for some players you won't be able to actually access this one anymore, but if you downloaded it in the past or just still have your same game save, then of course you will be able to drive it. The Aston Martin AMR One, a car which is very easily overshadowed by actually what is my favourite Le Mans car of all time, the other Aston, the Aston Lola B09-60, which is technically called the DBR1-2 by Aston themselves. Now that car is absolutely fantastic. It's a closed-top prototype, it's older than this one, and it's got that big V12 engine, sounds absolutely phenomenal, and even though there are quicker things out there, it is a really good all-rounder. This one, due to rule changes in real life, is very stunted on paper compared to the other car. It's got, instead of a 5.9 litre naturally aspirated V12, a turbo aspirated 2 litre straight 6. It's of course an open top instead of a closed top, which traditionally speaking means it's going to be slower, although personally I actually prefer using open top prototypes in games because you just get so much better visibility. In the closed top cars, I find them horrendous. Most often, the LMP1s in particular, it's like looking out of a World War II pillbox. The Peugeot 908, for example, is one of the absolute worst. I love the Group C era, because stuff like the Sauber C9 has great visibility. Open tops, though, you just can't beat them. And I find this one's cockpit view actually very reminiscent in terms of its usability and its aesthetic appeal to the LMP 900 BMW V12 LMR, which of course is one of the most iconic cars. Unlike that BMW though, this one wasn't exactly successful, and unfortunately that carries over a little bit into the game. Now I didn't realise, before quickly looking into this car's backstory before making this video, just how unsuccessful it was. In fact, this car was a failure. There's no real other way of saying it, because simply put, Aston Martin tried to put it into racing way too quickly. They were developing it as they went, instead of already developing it, and clearly, when they put more effort and more time in particular into the previous car, the results did show it is a more capable all-round machine. This one, though, in real life, barely did 2 to 4 laps of Le Mans before retiring. In fact, the car that they featured in the game retired after only 2 laps of the 24-hour race, and the other car, the 007 model, this one in the game is the 009, did 4 laps, then spent multiple hours in the pits only to retire. So, not just at Le Mans, but in other places as well, it was very unsuccessful. They had a number of DNSs, or did not start, due to trying to work on the car and get it ready for future events and learn from their mistakes, but it just wasn't a success, and that's a shame, because if nothing else, Aston makes some pretty nice looking race cars, and this one, even despite all that in real life, well, it actually has a lot of potential to be good in the game. Especially, for instance, if you race it against slightly lower PI prototypes, maybe even LMP2s, like the extremely capable Porsche RS Spyder, which you could strongly argue is probably the best all-round LMP2 car in the game. The Mazda B0986 is very good as well, but nowhere near as fast as it used to be. This one has some potential. That 2 litre engine does put out 540 horsepower and 435 pound-feet of torque, so it's certainly not lacking per se, especially for its size, and of course it only weighs 900 kilos. The performance is decent. I haven't tuned it in the game in quite some time, but if I recall correctly, I think when you modify it, de-restrict it in particular, you could get something like 215, 220 miles an hour out of it, I think. I may be wrong there, but I think it was something like that. So it's not bad, certainly not, it's just not quite there. And the PI shows that. If you compare it, for example, between this one unmodified to the Lola unmodified, the closed-top Gulf liveried Aston, that one has a PI of 989 when you've done nothing to it. That's already very high. This is 976. And even though that doesn't sound like a huge difference, for a car of this calibre, that's a pretty massive difference when it comes to prototypes. Now when you tune it up, again, if I remember correctly, I think you could get this one to be a Group X, as with a lot of the prototypes. So it certainly has the capability of being used against those top tier machines, but I think the crucial difference now in Forza 4, if you do go back and play it again, is it depends on what you're going to use it for. Because as with many cars, it depends massively on if you're going to use it in arcade mode against the AI, or if you're going to use it against real people. And really it's under those circumstances where most race cars get sorted wheat from chaff, because the great ones are the ones which can be raced against other real people and still win. Because of course real people, good drivers at least, are way better than AI. Whereas you can use a lot of cars, you could even, for instance, deliberately use a lesser car and still win in career mode if you're a good driver. So yes, you can definitely use this in career mode events and win races. And of course now, at the stage we are in the game, that's pretty much all you're going to be doing with the car, rather than racing it against real people. So it's a car which, in some senses, has kind of gotten better now than it was back when the servers were thriving for Forza 4, which is ironic. And it's also kind of a shame, because I hate it when that happens to cars which are really cool, like great to look at, great to listen to, and all things considered, really nice to drive. The handling is very pleasant, it doesn't have the most power, as I said, but sometimes, as I've mentioned, even in some of my real-world car reviews, having less power can actually mean that you can use more of it. And that could easily be the case here, and for the most part, I would say it actually is. 540 feels more than enough, to be honest, when you're actually behind the wheel, throwing it through corners. You can see how nimble this thing is. It likes to get its tail out a little bit, but it's a prototype with a lot of power, so that's not too much of a surprise. Overall, though, I would say it's actually one of the more forgiving LMP cars, either closed or open top, new or old. So ultimately, of course, this car isn't going to have as much use as it would have had back around when this game came out and when the DLC was released, but if you do fancy going back to the game and re-accessing your DLC, this might be one of those cars that's worth going back to and driving again to refresh your memory and have some fun, nostalgic driving or even races, because it is a car that did tend to get overlooked an awful lot. And interestingly, my final little interesting fact for those who stuck around in the video for long enough is that one of these chassis were actually used to develop the Delta Wing. And you can kind of see that. When you look at this car, you can see that Delta Wing shape in there. Almost if you remove the two front wheel arches and put the wheels in the middle instead, it does look an awful lot like that Delta Wing does. But overall, that's it for this review. Of course, tell me your thoughts on the AMR One down below. Did you used to use this car? Did you have success with it? Did you dislike it? And of course, check out the other reviews which I've done here on the channel as well. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.